At 39,000 feet, a billionaire's birthday party went dark. No Wi-Fi, no live stream, no warning. But when the engine failed minutes later, only one woman moved. She wasn't on the manifest. She wasn't even supposed to be there. Let's find out what really happened when a flight attendant decided to unplug the sky.
The Gulfstream G800 shimmered under the moonlight, slicing through the sky like a nightclub in motion. Inside, strobe lights bounced off champagne glasses and gold-plated speaker grills. Billionaire Clayton Briggs turned 40 tonight, and he wasn't just celebrating, he was broadcasting it live. Dozens of influencers in designer sneakers streamed from every angle, curating a high-altitude fantasy for their millions of followers. No one noticed the older black flight attendant gliding silently between rows of plush leather seats. Nyasha's name wasn't remembered. People called her ma'am or hey you when they needed another cocktail. Her uniform was spotless, her posture perfect, her silence expected. She scanned the cabin not with awe, but with alertness. Her eyes flicked toward the overhead router panel. Something was wrong. A network signature, faint, foreign, piggybacking the Wi-Fi system. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Briggs was mid-toast. The DJ raised the volume. Streams surged online. But Nyasha already knew this party wasn't just floating, it was compromised. And she was the only one who could see it coming.
She moved like part of the aircraft, quiet, precise, invisible. Nyasha walked the aisle between clinking glasses and ring lights, her tray balanced perfectly. To the guests, she was part of the scenery. No eye contact, no acknowledgement, just a well-pressed uniform and a neutral smile. A white influencer with frosted tips waved his phone like a wand. Hey, what's your name again?" He didn't wait for an answer. He never intended to. She handed him his drink and kept walking, her eyes sweeping over the digital panel above the cabin door. A red blip, a latency spike, nothing critical unless you'd seen what she had in her life before name tags. A woman in her mid-20s laughed loudly, half drunk. "I love how the staff is just so, professional. They don't even talk. It's kind of classy." Her friend leaned in. "Or creepy." They giggled. Nyasha heard every word. She'd heard worse. In Afghanistan, they used to call her a ghost. On this flight, she might as well be furniture. But ghosts notice patterns. As she bent to retrieve an empty flute, her eyes drifted to the router access panel near seat 14B. A subtle vibration, not from turbulence, from data traffic. The system was processing more than it should, and not from passenger use. Piggybacking. She whispered it in her head like a prayer. Someone or something was using the plane's connection as a gateway. The traffic signature matched something she'd seen years ago on a NATO base that had been digitally breached, seconds before its server melted from inside. She straightened. No alarm in her face, but her hands moved differently now. She no longer carried trays, she carried protocol. One of the influencers, live streaming from the first-class lounge, turned her phone toward Nyasha for a moment. "She's super intense, that stare. Is she okay?" The chat lit up. Creepy maid vibes. She gonna poison the caviar, LOL? Looks like TSA in disguise. But Nyasha wasn't watching. She was already running mental triage, counting the seconds between data pulses, logging IP variants, memorizing passenger movements. The plane was still in the sky, but the ground beneath them, the digital one, was shifting. And the woman in the aisle, she wasn't here to serve drinks. She was here to stop a war no one even knew had started.
She sat alone in the lounge section, hands folded over her belly, eyes calm but alert. Her name was Tamika Hill, 7 months pregnant, flying for the first time in years. A gift ticket, a last-minute seat upgrade, and a once-in-a-lifetime chance to network with a venture group sponsoring maternity health tech. She was supposed to feel grateful. Instead, she was being stared at. Excuse me," a woman's voice pierced the cabin. Nyasha turned instinctively. It was Madison, the blonde influencer with a mic clipped to her collarbone, live streaming every moment since boarding. "Why is she sitting there?" Madison said loudly, gesturing toward Tamika. "That's the influencer section. These are reserved seats." Tamika looked up. "I was assigned this seat." "No offense," Madison added, already offensive, "but some of us have brand deals riding on this content. The vibe's off." Someone chuckled nearby. Another phone turned on, filming. That's when Brittany, the other flight attendant, walked over. Blonde, early 30s, friendly smile with a patronizing undertone. "Hi, ma'am. Would you mind relocating just a few rows back? We want to avoid any misunderstandings." Tamika blinked. "I have a medical letter, and this seat was issued to me." Madison sighed. "Can't she just sit in the back?" Before anyone else could speak, a hand appeared. A glass of water, a folded blanket. Nyasha. She placed them gently on Tamika's side table, then leaned in, voice low, steady. "You sit here like a queen. Let them deal with their shame." The room fell into an awkward silence. Brittany looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Madison rolled her eyes and turned off her camera. Tamika didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. The two women exchanged a glance, not of solidarity, not of sisterhood, but of quiet mutual understanding in a world that rarely offered either. As Nyasha walked away, she felt the energy in the cabin shift, not from turbulence, but discomfort. People didn't like being reminded of their own bias, but some truths didn't need to be screamed. They just needed to be witnessed. And in that moment, Nyasha didn't just serve water. She served a line in the sand.
The party roared on, bass thumping, champagne flowing, followers climbing. But beneath the sound, something wasn't right. Nyasha stood near the galley, pretending to refill a tray of flutes. Her fingers tapped a discreet device embedded into the corner of her tablet, a diagnostic tool disguised as a drink inventory screen. She didn't need full access. She just needed the pattern. There it was again, a latency shift, then a redirect, packet drift. From outside, it looked like normal satellite handoff lag, but to someone like her, trained in field encryption and battlefield network integrity, it was digital smoke, the kind that masked intrusion, not error. She glanced toward the overhead router housing. The LED blinked twice, hesitated, then stabilized. Not normal. Something else was breathing through the system, light, fast, foreign. She activated a passive scan. It confirmed what she feared. The plane's Wi-Fi had been hijacked, not by some influencer streaming in 8K, but by a backdoor protocol routing traffic to an overseas IP cluster, masked through 5 proxies. Piggybacking. It wasn't just malware. This was a live breach. Someone was using the Gulf Stream as a relay, bouncing encrypted packets through its onboard network into an unsecured port within a major US banking architecture. And this wasn't random. It was sophisticated, precise, and timed. A ghost signal attack, meant to run undetected during livestream saturation. Use the party as a shield. Use the plane as a mask. Slip in. Slip out. Drain millions without a single footprint. Unless someone pulled the plug. Nyasha's hands moved faster now. She navigated through system diagnostics, cross-checking firmware signatures. The malware wasn't on board. It was riding the signal, a smart attack. But she could end it, not by hacking,
by going analog. A full Wi-Fi cut would terminate the route and break the relay chain. But doing so wouldn't just kill the breach, it would kill the party. The DJ was syncing beats through Bluetooth tethered to the onboard net. Cameras streamed through the same link. Guests were mid-brand deals. Clayton Briggs himself was recording his legacy speech for a major tech platform. If Nyasha pulled it now, she'd be crucified. If she didn't, the breach would punch through US digital borders in minutes. She made her choice. Set the tray down, slid open the access panel, and walked toward the engineering bay. Time to kill the sky before someone killed the system.
Nyasha didn't hesitate. She moved with purpose, past the espresso machine, past the racks of unopened wine, toward the side hatch labeled Maintenance, Crew Only, a space no influencer had ever filmed, a space most flight attendants never entered. But she had the override pin memorized. One twist, one pull, the panel opened with a hiss of recycled pressure. Inside, the heart of the aircraft's digital system, a web of routers, relays, and antenna controllers, all live, all humming. She didn't plug anything in. She simply reached behind the main router array and pulled the emergency network cutoff. It wasn't dramatic. No explosion, no sparks, just instant silence. 37 live streams cut at once. The LED wall behind the DJ froze, turned blue, then black. The beat stuttered, the crowd blinked. Then came the chaos. What the hell? Is this a prank? My stream just dropped, millions of viewers. The DJ slapped buttons. Madison threw her ring light across the aisle. Phones everywhere lost signal. Panic followed. The cabin, once a cloud of curated euphoria, descended into pure influencer meltdown. Then came Clayton Briggs. He stormed from the private lounge like a hurricane in tailored silk. Who authorized a network kill? We're 30,000 feet in the air and you just unplugged our connection to the world. No one answered. A passenger pointed. Her, the maid. She was near the panel. Briggs turned. His eyes locked on Nyasha, still standing by the hatch. The maid, he repeated louder. Did the maid unplug the jet? Laughter trickled across the cabin, the kind that stabs. Phones turned toward her again. One camera began filming. Explain yourself, Briggs barked. Nyasha didn't speak. She didn't flinch. She simply closed the hatch, checked the latch, and walked back toward the galley. Silence followed. She just pulled the plug on the world's loudest party. Not with anger, not with drama, with certainty. Because while they chased clout and clicks, she saw a breach that could wipe out lives, and she acted. No approval, no backup, just the last quiet professional left in a sky full of noise.
First class had never gone this quiet. The DJ sat in stunned silence, the LED lights now frozen in awkward hues of pink and blue. Cameras stopped rolling, not because anyone turned them off, but because there was nothing left to flex. The vibe was dead. Clayton Briggs, still fuming, stood in the center of the aisle like a disgraced emperor. Is this how you sabotage a milestone? He snapped. We were broadcasting history. Do you understand the brand damage? Nyasha stood by the galley wall, arms folded behind her back. Her face betrayed nothing. She had seen men like this in war zones, men whose power was only real when the lights stayed on. You disabled a system you don't have access to, he continued, now turning to the rest of the cabin. Who saw her near the panel? Madison raised her hand without hesitation. She walked back there right before it went dark. Another influencer added. She was lurking earlier, weird energy. A third chimed in, "She didn't even smile once the whole flight." Briggs pointed at Nyasha like a prosecutor before a jury. "You're a flight attendant. You don't touch tech infrastructure. You don't improvise. This isn't some high school drama. You're on a billion-dollar aircraft with government clearance." Then came the fatal line. "Did the maid think she was the engineer?" Laughter erupted. Not loud, but cruel, sharp, nasty. Phones rose again. Some passengers smiled as they filmed. This was no longer a party. It was public execution. Nyasha stared straight ahead. She could have spoken. She could have told him about the breach, the IP anomaly, the live data funnel routing through their party into a financial kill switch. But she didn't, because no one wanted the truth from her. Not in that moment. Not from her. Briggs stepped closer. "Well, do you have anything to say?" She met his gaze and said nothing. The silence was louder than any confession. Briggs scoffed. "You're done. When we land, consider this your last flight. Someone else will finish the shift." He turned. The crowd resumed whispering, giggling, tapping screens. But in that silence, one truth became cemented. They didn't fire her because she broke protocol. They fired her because she interrupted their illusion. And for people who live in illusions, reality is unforgivable.
They didn't even wait for landing. Within 20 minutes of the incident, a new flight attendant, a perky blonde in her 20s, emerged from the rear galley, pressed uniform, practiced smile. She looked like someone fresh off a recruitment ad. Passengers nodded approvingly. The disruption had been corrected. The vibe restored. Meanwhile, Nyasha was reassigned to a jump seat near the rear hatch. Not officially fired, not legally terminated, just moved, silently. Briggs didn't speak to her again. He didn't need to. Power never yells twice. The other crew avoided eye contact. Brittany dropped her usual smile. Even the DJ wouldn't meet her gaze when he came to ask for water. To them, she was radioactive now. But Nyasha didn't flinch. She wasn't here for the playlist or the cameras. She didn't come to serve champagne or reheated flattery. She came to stop something. And she did. Even if no one knew it, even if no one thanked her, even if they erased her the moment she acted. She sat alone in the rear of the plane, hands folded, breathing steady. In her lap, the tablet she used to monitor the signal breach. Now dormant. She could have sent a report to air traffic control. She could have uploaded logs to the FAA. She could have screamed. But none of that would have mattered, because people don't believe ghosts, and that's all she'd ever been allowed to be. She looked out the porthole, clouds layered like silk, soft and endless. Somewhere above, the plane's GPS had reset. The breach had been severed. She had cut the cord. At a cost. Back in first class, Madison resumed her stream. New hook, new lipstick, new lighting. The party had a glitch, she said, nothing major. The footage of Nyasha had already hit 2 private group chats. Someone had captioned it, "Triggered Sky Karen, kills Wi-Fi over nothing." The crowd had decided. The story had been written. But Nyasha never needed a story. She just needed the plane to stay in the sky.
Before she wore polyester and poured champagne at 39,000 feet, she wore desert camo and carried an encrypted toolkit heavier than her sidearm. They didn't call her a flight attendant back then. They called her Firewall. The flashback came not as a memory, but as instinct. As Nisha sat quietly at the back of the jet, replaying the breach in her head, her mind slipped effortlessly into a moment 12 years prior. Kandahar, nightfall. She was lying flat on her stomach inside a data relay outpost that smelled like sand and burnt copper. Outside, enemy artillery had just taken out a telecom tower. Inside, the network was still breathing, but just barely. Her commanding officer knelt beside her, bleeding from a graze wound. "You're the last firewall," he said, voice tight with pain. "If they reach this server, everything falls." She didn't flinch. She didn't ask for backup. She just opened her gear kit and got to work. 20 minutes later, with half a base running blind, she rerouted the remaining data through a single encrypted tunnel, bounced it through a temporary uplink, and ghosted the entire outpost from enemy trace. The attack failed. No one gave her a medal. One soldier called her a freak. Another said, "Women don't usually survive here." She stayed silent then, too. What mattered wasn't the headline. What mattered was that the system held. Back in the present, Nisha's fingers twitched slightly. The motions were still embedded in her muscle memory. Trace, isolate, rewire, erase. That had been her job for 7 years. Then came the drawdown, budget cuts, outsourcing. Her unit was disbanded. Her name sealed under a classified clearance nobody ever revisited. She disappeared without ceremony. Years later, a private aviation recruiter offered her a job perfect for someone who likes quiet work. She accepted. But that part of her, the firewall, never really shut down. So when the sky lit up with fake signals and rich voices demanded champagne instead of clarity, she knew what to do. Because ghosts don't need orders. They just need one signal: danger. And when that signal comes, they move. Not for glory, not for revenge, but because someone has to, and no one else will.
It began as a flicker, just a stutter in the cabin lights, barely noticeable to anyone still wrapped in the post-drama haze. The DJ had gone quiet. The vibe was awkward, but returning. Phones were reconnecting. Then came the sound. Whoomp. Deep. Mechanical. Uneven. It didn't belong in the sky. From her seat at the rear, Nyasha's head turned sharply. One of the engines, right side, had just skipped a rotation. The cabin pressure fluctuated subtly, nothing dramatic yet. The pilots probably didn't even notice, but she did. The vibration through the floor had changed. Within 10 seconds, a soft chime rang from the cockpit, then another. In first class, Clayton Briggs looked up from his tablet. "What now?" The crew whispered. Brittany peeked at the control panel on the wall, eyes widening. The right engine wasn't gone, but it was struggling. Then came the full shudder. The aircraft jolted, dipped half a foot, recovered. Passengers screamed. Glasses spilled. Someone cried out, "Is this a crash?" "No," said someone else. "It's turbulence, right?" Except it wasn't. Nyasha had felt this exact motion once before in a Black Hawk over Iraq when the fuel pressure valve seized mid-air. This wasn't turbulence. This was failure. In the cockpit, warning lights flared. The backup systems didn't auto-correct. Captain Reynolds barked at his co-pilot, "Recalibrate the flow rate." No response. The engine wasn't responding. Because it wasn't being fed the right data. Because the control signal was being hijacked, or worse, rerouted. Nyasha stood. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't grab tools. She moved like she was back in combat. Toward the galley, toward the service panel, toward the dark belly of the plane. Back in first class, someone muttered, "Why is she moving again? Shouldn't she be fired?" Nobody stopped her, because by the time they noticed, she was gone, vanished beneath the floor. The plane dipped again, longer this time. A wine bottle rolled across the aisle, and as the passengers gripped armrests, praying it would pass, the only person who could fix it was already in the wires.
Nyasha crawled through the underbelly of the jet, her shoulders scraping the cold aluminum as the engine above her roared unevenly. The maintenance corridor was never meant for someone like her, too tight, too crude, but she moved like she'd trained for it her entire life, because she had. Low light flickered from the emergency strips. Her fingers ran across panels, wires, bulkheads. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for a ghost. And she found it, tucked behind a sealed junction box, a black device, small, precise, blinking green. Signal diverter. It wasn't just redirecting data, it was corrupting the command chain to the right engine's pressure regulators. Every input the cockpit made was being delayed or scrambled. No matter what the pilot tried, the engine wouldn't stabilize because it wasn't being told the truth. She yanked the diverter cable free. The lights blinked. The hum shifted. Still not enough. Backup systems needed to be rerouted manually. She reached into her vest and pulled out a pre-coded wire relay, military issue, never commercial, plugged it into the old port she found near the auxiliary battery hub. For 2 seconds, nothing. Then the hum shifted again. The backup engine responded. Above her, the cabin jolted one final time, then stabilized. Passengers gasped. In a cockpit, Captain Reynolds shouted, "We're back! Right engine normal!" They wouldn't know why. They'd assume it's self-corrected. They'd log it as a temporary fluctuation, because no one would ever check beneath the floor. But Nyasha knew better. She tapped a final command into her device, locking the bypass in place. Then, from behind her, a sound. Not the engine, not the plane. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Close. Someone had followed her. She reached for her utility blade, breath held. A shadow moved near the far panel. 2 figures. Tactical posture. Armed. She rolled to the side, silent, pressed against the metal. They weren't crew. They weren't lost. They were part of the breach. Secondary operatives. Failsafes. The first man knelt, scanning the wires. The second turned, scanning with infrared. But they didn't see her. Not yet. She slipped behind the coolant pipe and waited, breath sinking with the engine pulse. If she moved now, she'd lose the element of surprise. If she waited too long, she might not move again. The ghost under the floor had fitched the engine, but the sabotage wasn't over. And now, it was hunting her back. The Gulfstream glided back into silence. This time not from failure, but from stability. The right engine was holding. Cabin pressure had normalized. Captain Reynolds reported minor tech turbulence to air traffic control. Nothing serious, nothing worth investigating. Just a strange blip, now resolved. In the underdeck, Nyasha crawled back toward the hatch, heart pounding, sweat dripping into her eyes. The 2 operatives hadn't spotted her. One false move and they would have, but years of training taught her that presence was louder than noise. She disappeared like she had arrived, unseen.
Back in the main cabin, influencers were repacking ring lights. The DJ rebooted his track. Briggs checked his tablet and found full signal restored. He didn't ask how. He didn't wonder why. He just assumed things went back to normal because they were supposed to. Nyasha emerged from the galley as if returning from a routine inspection. No one looked at her, not even Brittany. She walked past first class, pulled her carry-on from the storage bay, and waited near the exit door. 10 minutes later, the Gulfstream touched down at LAX. No applause, no announcement, just a smooth, quiet landing
on a sunny afternoon. Passengers disembarked in designer sunglasses, dragging roller bags and portable tripods. They were already refreshing their feeds. One man paused before stepping out. He looked at Nyasha, then turned to his wife. "She never smiled once," he muttered. His wife nodded, annoyed. "Maybe she doesn't like her job." Nyasha heard it. Of course she did. But she didn't blink. She stepped onto the mobile staircase, the California heat meeting her like a wall of clean fire. Asphalt shimmered beneath her shoes. No crew waved goodbye. No ground staff looked twice. She walked across the tarmac, badge clipped, hair pinned back, not one strand out of place. And when she reached the perimeter gate, she stopped, looked back once, not at the plane, but at the sky. It was still clear, still safe, and still oblivious to what it had nearly lost. She turned and kept walking, not out of shame, not in retreat, but because ghosts don't linger. And her shift was over. The headlines the next morning were clean. National Bank cyber attack foiled in final stage, authorities investigating origin. Experts stunned, breach terminated mid-execution. No suspects, no arrests, no answers. Security analysts across 3 continents tried to trace the disruption. All they found was a digital dead end, like someone had pulled the plug from inside a vacuum. Some said it was an AI misfire. Others blamed human error. No one considered a woman on a plane. Nyasha's name didn't appear on the manifest. The airline logged no maintenance issue, no network failure, no crew conflict. The camera footage during the breach window? Conveniently corrupted. She'd left no fingerprints. No version of her ever officially existed at 39,000 feet. But far from the headlines, in a modest neighborhood in Newark, a young woman named Tamika Hill sat on her porch reading the news. She smiled because she remembered the water, the blanket, the words, "You sit here like a queen." And across the country, at a high-level cybersecurity summit in D.C., a low-resolution thermal image was briefly shown, a blurry silhouette inside a Gulfstream's maintenance hatch. They called her the ghost in the floor. Just a theory, but one general stared longer than the rest. He knew that posture. He whispered, "Firewall's still out there." Meanwhile, in a storage unit in San Pedro, a uniform hung untouched, folded, pressed, waiting, not for credit, not for justice, but for the next signal. Because heroes don't always want statues. Some just want the system to keep running. Some just want people to make it home. And some, they save the world, then clock out like it was just another shift.
In a world obsessed with visibility, this story is about the opposite. It's about the people we never notice until the moment they save everything. Nyasha wasn't a hero in uniform. She wasn't trending. She wasn't even acknowledged by name. But in a matter of minutes, she made decisions that protected not just one flight, but an entire financial system. She didn't do it for clout. She didn't do it for a raise. She did it because she knew no one else would. That's the kind of courage we rarely see in real time, because it hides behind silence, skill, and sacrifice. This story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. Why do we dismiss those who don't demand attention? Why do we believe loud is strong and quiet is weak? And maybe most importantly, how many systems in our world are still standing only because someone like Nyasha refused to let them fall?
The next time you're tempted to overlook the person serving your drink, managing your network, or staying behind the scenes, remember this flight, because not all ghosts disappear. Some just clock out without saying a word. If this story shook you, even just a little, don't let it vanish like seat 32F. Hit like, drop a comment, and make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's story might be about someone sitting next to you. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone do the right thing quietly without asking for recognition? Or what would you have done if you were in Nyasha's shoes? We read every comment. We reply to many. And your voice? It's what makes this community real. Coming up next week, the janitor who erased a $1 billion scam with one mop. You don't want to miss it.